there and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. My name is Karen and I am excited to take you through some of the basic elements of crochet crafting. If you clicked on this video, it's because you already watched our video about how to place a slip knot on your hook and how to crochet your basic chain stitch. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how we're going to crochet our single crochet stitch. This is usually one of the first stitches you learn as a new crocheter, and one of the first ways you're going to get really excited about being able to create any project you desire. So, are you ready to learn this wonderful and fabulous craft? Well, let's get started. Okay, so anytime you work on a crochet project, the four things you'll always need is your yarn, your hook, a pair of scissors, and a yarn needle. And I always like to remind people that a yarn needle is much different than a thread needle. It's a little bit thicker and it has a larger eye. So just make sure to be very specific with your needle. And for beginners, I always recommend using a medium 4-weight yarn. Yarn comes in a variety of different weights, and a medium 4 is not too thick and it's not too thin. It's just perfect for beginners, and that's what I have here. This is just some leftover yarn I had from another project. And the hook size I always recommend for beginners is a 6mm hook, which is also known as a J or a size 10. And again, the reason for that is it's a nice size, it's not too bulky, and it's not too thin, and it works really great with a medium 4-weight yarn. So let's get started and let's talk about our single crochet stitch. So as you can see here, I've already got some chain stitches worked up. Now I have a total of 15 chains on my hook. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to make sure that my yarn is comfortably situated in my non-dominant hand, and I've got my hook ready to go. And so what I'm going to do now is I need to make sure that I can find the second chain from the hook, okay? So what you always want to remember is that this loop that's on the hook, it never counts as anything. It's just resting on the hook. It's waiting to be told what job you want it to do. So we always begin counting from right here. So we have 1, and we have 2. Now, if you're ever wondering, well, how on earth can I really tell? So in the last video, we talked about the front of the chains have what looks like these V's, and the back has these bumps. So when we're counting our chains, what we're doing is we're counting each of these V's. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. We want to make sure we never count this knot. So sometimes, I'm just going to tighten that there so we can really see the difference. So sometimes people might accidentally count that as a stitch. That is just our knot, which is our slip knot. Okay, so we've got our chain. We happen to have 15. And like I said, we're going to count that second chain from our hook. So we have 1 and 2. And now what we're going to do is you're going to take your hook and you're going to insert it into that chain stitch, just like that. Okay. Now I want you at this point to pay attention to how I'm holding my yarn and how I'm holding the hook. This is the part with new crocheters that can be a little frustrating because we forget. We are busy looking over here and we forget how everything is situated. So if you're just holding here and you're holding the hook, you see, nothing is happening because the chain is just hanging out in space here. So you want to make sure with your thumb and your middle finger, which is the one that's most comfortable for me, I kind of hang on to the chain. And then I use my index finger just to create a little bit of tone so that I can really see my work and make sure that I can hold on to the chain. So again, I have 1, 2, now I'm holding on to it here, and then I'm going to insert my hook into that chain there. Now you probably saw that I kind of held a little bit the loop on the hook. That just helps me to control the tone on this loop here so it doesn't accidentally get too tight. So right now it looks like this. And then I'm going to yarn over. So remember I said we dip that hook under, and there it is. You're hooking the yarn. And now you're going to pull it through that chain, just like that. And now you have 2 loops that are sitting on your hook. See, pretty easy, right? Let's do that again just to make sure. So now see what's happening here? See, this chain is getting tight. Now this is a common boo-boo that happens, see? And so sometimes people might go 1 and 2 and forget that. So this is why it's important that you don't inadvertently tighten your individual stitches. So I'm just going to do another chain here to replace that. So I have 1 and 2. I take my hook and I insert it into that chain, just like that. And then I yarn over so that I can hook this working yarn and pull it through just like that. And now we have 2 loops on our hook. Once you've got 2 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over again. And this time when you hook this yarn, you're going to pull it through 1 and 2. So I'm going to pull it through here. Now again, notice I'm keeping it a bit relaxed. So I pull through 1 and I pull through 2, and our very first single crochet has been created. So you can see that there's 2 little legs there to that stitch, 1 and 2. Let's do that again. The first one is always the trickiest because we have to find that second chain. Now you might be wondering, well, what happened to the first chain? That doesn't really count as anything. It's just there to give us some space to kind of bend our work to now work back across. Okay, so then we would go into the next chain, which is right there. Insert your hook. You're going to yarn over. See how the hook hooks the yarn? That's why it's called a hook. And then you pull that through the first chain. Now be careful that you don't continue, because that would be a slip stitch, and that's a completely different stitch, which we will have a separate tutorial all about how to do the slip stitch. But right now the single crochet is what we're focusing on. So you don't want to pull through, you just want to bring up a loop. You have 2 loops on your hook. Now you're going to yarn over, and now you're going to pull through all of them, just like that. That is your second single crochet. Let's do a third. So we're going to insert our hook into the next chain. Again, notice that I'm hanging on to my chain to secure it and keep it nice and taut. So I'm going to insert my hook into the next chain. I will yarn over to hook the yarn. Now make sure, now sometimes I see people actually yarning under, so they might get confused. They might actually take the hook and bring it over and bring it through. Now you can do it this way. I just find that if that becomes a habit, it slightly changes the texture of the stitch. It actually does. Is it the end of the world? No, but I would say go with the status quo and make sure that when you're yarning over that it is the yarn that's going over, okay? So you just see me dip the hook under. That makes sure that the yarn is over, and it makes it a lot easier to hook it through. So when I pull it through, I pull up a loop first, okay? Now I have 2 loops on the hook, and then I'm gonna yarn over, and I'm gonna pull through all 2, okay? So now I've done 3 single crochets. Now this one is a little bit pointy. That's normal, okay, in the beginning. So now I have 3 single crochets there. Hopefully you can see that. Now I'm going to continue on and place 1 single crochet into each chain all the way to the end of my chain. So I would suggest you do that. Press pause. And then when you're done, I'll meet up with you at the end of the chain, and I'll show you how you would continue making more rows of the single crochet stitch. Okay, I'm coming up to the end of my chain, and so I just wanted to show you so it's nice and clear where the last stitch is. So remember, this is the knot, and the last chain is right there. So I'm going to insert my hook, and see, sometimes I'll hold that tail just to help it out. I'll pull up a loop, so I have 2 loops on the hook. Then I'll yarn over and pull through 2. And row 1 of my project is complete. So now you can really see that you're starting to build something. This is the part that gets really exciting because like, oh wow, it went from just a piece of yarn to now a full row. So you can see a little bit more clearly the tops of your stitches have those V's. And then when we turn it over, you can see the back there. So see the 2 little legs kind of splay out there. So if I pull this open a little bit, that is the top of your stitches, that space there, and that's where we would work into. Now, what's really important, if you've got a project that said to chain 15, like I did, and then find your second chain from the hook and start single crocheting, at the end of row 1, how many stitches do you think you will have? Just before I tell you, pop it down in the comments. How many stitches do you think row number 1 should have? And counting your stitches is really, really important. So we're going to count our stitches here. You can see the tops here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, so this little loop here does not count. Now, if you said 14, that would be correct. So remember that we skipped 1 chain at the beginning. And so that 1 chain, which is right here, helps us kind of curve up to start our row. So our row now has 14 stitches. And if we were doing something like a scarf, let's say, this is a pretty narrow scarf, but let's just pretend this is a scarf, then all of your rows should now continue having 14 stitches. So let's go on to row number 2 of how to crochet a single crochet. And I want to show you how you would maintain this stitch count, because this is also another part where sometimes new crocheters make a little bit of a boo-boo. So once you reach the end of your row, you're going to chain 1. So remember our chain? We yarn over and we just pull through that 1 stitch, okay? And this just gives us a little bit of height. So then you will turn your work. And now, like I've said before, I'm right-handed, so I work from right to left, okay? Now, if you're left-handed, you would work, this is a little awkward for me, but you would work from left to right. So for you, if you had just finished, you would chain 1 and turn your work so that now you could begin again from left to right. Okay, I hope that helps. I know sometimes the left-handed crafters get left out, but I'm really trying hard to make sure that this makes sense for you as well. It's funny because I have some in-person crochet classes and I've had left-handed people in my classes before. So what I tend to do is if we're sitting at a table, I just get the left-handed person to sit across from me so that basically they just mirror what I do. And I found that that's been fairly successful in teaching people how to crochet that are left-handed. In this case, hopefully that explanation has helped you as well. So I've turned my work and I've got that chain 1. So now we're going to single crochet and come back across to the other side. So what we're going to do is we are going to go into the very first stitch. So if I just pull my work a little bit, see how you can see those gaps? That is the stitch. So this chain 1, again, it doesn't really count as anything. It's just helping us kind of create a little height. So I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch. Now I want you to notice something. When you place your hook in that stitch, you have 2 loops of that stitch over the hook. When we worked into chain stitches, we only had 1 loop, you probably noticed, okay? But from here on out, anytime you insert your hook into a full stitch, you will have the tops of those V's above the hook, okay? So then you continue, you yarn over, you hook the working yarn, and you pull that through. And look at that. You now have your 2 loops on the hook. You'll then yarn over and then pull through both loops. And that is your first single crochet of row number 2. Now, sometimes what people like to do, especially if you're a knitter, I know knitters especially don't like counting, because in knitting, it's really easy. Once you finish the row, you've gone through all of the loops, you just turn and start over. With crochet, it's a little different. It really is important to pay attention to the number of stitches. So sometimes what I recommend, actually a lot of times for new crocheters, is get a stitch marker or something as easy as a safety pin or a bobby pin and hook it through these 2 loops right away. This will help you remember that when you come back around, that's the last stitch of your row, because it's very common that gets missed. So these are the little foibles that can happen with new crocheters. So let's go on. Now it's a little easier to see where to go. You've got these full stitches you're working into. So you take your hook, you insert it into the full stitch, and you yarn over, pull the loop up so that you have 2 loops, then you yarn over and pull through 2. Let's do it again. We take our hook, we insert it into the full stitch, we yarn over, and then hook that yarn, pull it through, and notice how I'm keeping it relaxed. So I have 2 loops on the hook, I yarn over, and I pull through those 2 loops. So now we've created 3 single crochets. Now, I really stress when I'm teaching very new crocheters to really just get comfortable. Do tons and tons of single crochets, because what tends to happen is sometimes, see this? Look at how tight I'm holding it. So I'm going to show you an example here. I'm holding this really tight. I'm going to pull it through, see? And so I get this, so they get it really tight, and then they're yarning over, and then they're pulling it tight, and then they go tight into the next one, really tight, like very flush to the hook. Tight. Look at how tight this stitch is compared to this. Now, when you come back around and you want to work into that stitch, boy, oh boy, that's super tight to get that hook in there. Whereas this one is nice and easy. Now, it is normal that you may crochet a little tighter in the beginning. It's just because you're trying to figure out how much tone to hold your hook and your yarn with. So don't get too frustrated. It will be frustrating when you're trying to squeeze your hook into a very tight stitch, but that'll just tell you that you need to kind of work on staying just a wee bit more relaxed. So really try and practice when you pull up a loop, just bring it a little bit. See how there's just a little bit of space there. So your hook should glide nice and easily through that hook, okay? You don't want it to be huge like this, but you want it to have an ease of glide, okay? And so that's your single crochet. Now I'm gonna go ahead and finish this to the end of row number 2 here, just so you guys can see it. Now I am speeding up a bit here, but I just wanna get to the end of the row so you guys can see, because this is another part where sometimes there's a wee bit of a boo-boo here. Now, I have 2 stitches left. Now, this one is easy to see, but this can get lost because we can't really see where the stitch is. This was that first chain. Remember when we did that turning chain where we skipped a chain? Well, this one kind of lays down a bit, so it's easy to miss. So sometimes people will go in here and they'll single crochet, and it's obvious that it's not done, but they're not quite sure where to put your hook. So first thing to do, if you're ever unsure, I mean, this one is quite obvious, but always count your stitches. So if I count back, and I always start from the loop because it's much easier. I start from the loop and I count all the way back to that first stitch. And if you have a stitch marker, then you know where that last stitch is. And if I count back, I go, I only have 13 stitches. I know I have to have 14. So just turn your work a little bit. And once you see that V, then you'll know that's where your stitch is. So you're going to insert, and sometimes I just turn it around a little bit. So I pick up this loop and then I help it go through the second loop. So remember, you've got to have both loops on the top of that stitch on your hook. See that? So this is the loop that's on my hook. This is the stitch. Then I yarn over, I pull through the stitch so that I have 2 loops. I yarn over and pull through both. And now I've completed row number 2. And now see how that looks a little bit more like it should. So that's what's really going to help you keep nice, straight edges, okay? Now back to when we talked about the chain stitch as well. If you chain too tightly and then this one is relaxed, your work is going to start to bow out like this. So we want to make sure that our sides stay nice and straight. So what I would recommend you do is maybe make a scarf for yourself or your cat or something like that. Let's just keep crocheting rows and rows and rows so you get really comfortable with this chain stitch. So anytime you begin a row, you always chain 1. Again, I'm keeping it nice and relaxed. And you turn your work. And you will always go immediately into that very first stitch. You'll pull up a loop first, so there's 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through 2. And again, I always recommend, and I didn't have one on me, place a safety pin or a bobby pin there so that when you come to the end, you'll know where to place your last stitch. So for me here, this is my last stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish a few more rows just to work up a little bit of a chunk so you can see what your fabric will look like. So I hope that you are finding this nice and clear. And if you have any questions, make sure to leave them for me in the comment box down below. And of course, you can also email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And I'm very happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a few more rows, and I suggest you do the same, and then we can compare our swatch. Okay, so I have completed 7 rows of my single crochet stitch. So you can see it creates a nice dense fabric. And if I just pull it a little bit, you can just see the tops of the stitches. Now, some people will ask, well, how do I count these rows? I can't see them. So once you get a little bit more comfortable and more familiar with what the stitch looks like on the front, so you see how the V's? That's the front of the stitch, and the row below it has the legs coming out with the little band around it. That's the back of the stitch. So it might be a little tricky to see, but see the fronts of our stitches? They have a little V. Now, if I were to turn that over, see, there's the legs kind of splay out to the side. Now, it still can be a little confusing if you're looking at it this way going, oh Lord, how many rows do I have? Because the single crochet stitch creates these little spaces at the top of each row, this is how I tend to count my rows. So I'm just going to place it down here. I'm going to zoom in here. And so I just stretch it out a little bit so I know, see that space there? That's row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that's the top row there. Let me spread that out there. So you can see the top of each stitch creates just a little bit of a space there. A little gap. And that's how you would count your rows. So I have done 7 rows. So this is what my work looks like. And our edges are fairly straight. Now, of course, you're going to see a little tiny bumpiness. That's fine. That's just our chain 1 coming up around the bend. What you don't want is large bumps on the side. Now, I do have a tutorial all about how to keep your edges straight. And I'll leave a link for that in the description box down below. But what I would recommend is just do a lot of practicing of your single crochet stitch. And the thing is, you can create so many projects with just a single crochet stitch. So I know it's really tempting to want to run and do double crochets, half double crochets, triple crochets, there's so many cool stitches. And then you're going to want to do granny squares and granny shells and all kinds of cool things. But I would recommend get really comfortable with your hook and your yarn and create your basic stitch. So that's going to be your single crochet, which means you have to get very comfortable with your slip knot and your chain. So these three are the first three that I would really strongly recommend getting super, super comfortable with. Okay, so if you are a brand new crocheter or you're a curious crocheter, perhaps you haven't started yet, but you're curious about this craft of crochet, I hope that you found this basic introductory tutorial very clear and easy to follow. Hopefully you've also watched the one on the slip knot and the chain stitch. And of course, there's links for those in the description box down below. And as I said previously, if you have any questions, please do feel free to leave them for me in the comment box down below. Also, if you think that this video will be useful to a friend of yours, please do feel free to share it. I'm really here to share my love of this craft. And I really believe that if we go nice and slowly and take our time, that it really can be very easy to understand and to follow. So please do share it. And if you liked it, please do give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. It helps me know that I'm on the right track with these types of tutorials. And if you're new here, I invite you to come hang out with me every Wednesday morning when I upload a brand new tutorial. So make sure to press that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you'll get notified every time that happens. All right, well, that's it for me today. Hopefully, I am setting you on the path to crocheting tons of single crochet stitches, and hopefully you're going to have a great time exploring this new stitch. So have an amazing day, happy crocheting, and I will see you in the next session. Bye-bye.